June 29, 1764 is a special day in the history of the Volga Germans. 59 settlers founded Monica, the first German colony on the Volga, which is now called Nischnjaja, i.e. Lower Dobrinka. Hardly any of the founders expected to encounter a trade route here. In ancient times, troops led by Stepan Razin had robbed trade caravans on the lower Volga. The legendary ataman hid in the caves several dozen versts upstream. Stepan Razin and his comrade, the robber Urak, quarreled one day over a girl. Urak took his share of the loot and set up his own camp downstream. Since then, the mountain on the left bank of the Dobrinka river, which flows into the Volga, has been called Urak's Hill. The stories of many treasures allegedly buried here by the robbers still stir the minds of treasure hunters to this day. According to one version, the Germans who settled here 100 years after Stepan Razin's execution were the first to find the robbers' treasures. The archaeologist Professor Ballot claimed in his 1923 book The Volga Pompeii that the Germans from Dobrinka came to the foot of the mountain and excavated there a two-handled cauldron with golden coins of oval shape. Well, perhaps therein lies the secret of the unexpectedly rapid flourishing of Dobrinka. But the Germans also had to endure much misfortune from the Volga robbers. The spirit of free, lawless life appeared very much alive. Hardly had the resettlers founded the colony Lower Dobrinka when the new universally feared robber named Yemelian Pugachev appeared. The inhabitants experienced firsthand the cruelty and greed of people who had nothing to lose. Yemelian Pugachev filled his army, just like Stepan Razin before him, with fleeing peasants facing the gallows upon their capture. They considered all free and seemingly wealthy people who also spoke a different language as class enemies. Pugachev's troops completely looted Lower Dobrinka. It was only after the suppression of the peasant uprising that the town was rebuilt. For this, God saved Lower Dobrinka as well as many other places on the right bank of the Volga from raids by the so-called Kaiser Kirghizen, i.e. steppe nomads. The rulers of the steppes along the left bank felt at home in the saddle, but the great river presented an insurmountable obstacle to them. The Kaiser Kirghizen did not build boats, let alone sailboats, and could not steer them. Therefore, the villages on the right bank were in an advantageous position from the start and had such a strange developmental advantage. Lower Dobrinka counted 290 houses in the mid-19th century, half of which were stone buildings. There were even two-story buildings. Most settlers belonged to the evangelical Lutheran denomination. The stone church was built in the mid-19th century and accommodated 800 worshippers. It was among the 5 oldest German churches in the Volga region and represented an outstanding example of settler architecture that combined the traditions of Russian classicism and European architecture. At the end of the 19th century, there was a church community school and a public one here. Almost 100% of the residents were literate. Both agriculture and craftsmanship developed very rapidly in the settlement. At the mouth of the Dobrinka and Medveditsa rivers into the Volga, the settlers built mills. First water mills, then steam-powered ones. The threshing stones produced in Dobrinka were very popular and sold to neighboring towns. In 1862, there were 18 industrial enterprises here, including a weaving mill, dyeing and sawmills, as well as 2 shops and 3 taverns. It is hardly believable that the German resettlers succeeded in establishing a flourishing colony in this remote corner. Lower Dobrinka is still perceived as a remote place today. The nearest regional centers are more than 200 kilometers away. The only asphalt road was built here from Kamyshin just 10 years ago. Attempting to reach the village from Saratov on the short route in bad weather can end in a catastrophe. The temptingly straight asphalt road that branches off from the route breaks off in the middle of the steppe. The further journey turns into a Dakar rally, and this in the 21st century. It is hard to imagine how one could have come here 200 years ago. The answer to this question is actually very simple. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the most important road here was the Volga. In Dobrinka there was a landing stage that belonged to the commercial steam navigation before the revolution. In winter, the river turned into a wide ice road for sled transportation. Moreover, the river provided the residents with good sustenance, not only with fish. At that time, almost every village had its own island, including Lower Dobrinka. The islands abounded in game, mushrooms and berries. With a change of state power in Russia, the well-being of the settlers came to an end. During the Civil War in 1918, the town was almost completely burned down. In the 20s, the Special Commission for the Liquidation of Kulak farms raged here. In 1937, the falsified show trial against the right Trotskyist gang of pests took place. 11% of the residents were convicted, and in August 1941, the entire German population was brought to Saratov on barges and then banished to Siberia and Kazakhstan. After the filling of the Volgograd reservoir in 1961, the landscape here changed drastically. The nutrient-rich island disappeared underwater. The conditions of navigation on this broad water surface have approached those of the sea. Waves 2 to 3 meters high are not uncommon. The natural harbor of Dobrinka now has special significance for navigation. It is marked as a refuge on the navigation charts of the reservoir. Here, one can take refuge from almost any storm and wait it out. However, even these grim cliffs will not be able to withstand the waves forever. The right bank, deprived of natural protection in the form of islands, is constantly being eroded. The houses on the edge of the cliff will eventually end up in the water. The church suffered irreparable damage from fire in 1998. However, today's residents, among whom there are no direct descendants of the original settlers, strive to preserve the historical heritage of the Germans and do not lose hope for the restoration of the church. In 2014, the 250th anniversary year of the arrival of the first German settlers, they erected a memorial stone here with the inscription, "Their path became part of our shared history." The fascinating area has an incredible important significance for the culture of both countries, Russia and Germany. Here began the history of the German Volga region, and it would be symbolic if the history of its restoration were to begin here as well.